Hi there, and welcome to the overall APUSH Period 4 review. I'm your APUSH Lady Boss. Thanks for joining me. If you'd like to take some follow along notes as you go through these slides, go ahead and click down in the description and you will be able to do so. So we're going to go over how important is this period for the overall APUS history curriculum. We're going to dive into each lesson topic and talk about the skill of causation. I'm going to tell you the most important terms as decided by the College Board, briefly go over how you can use the key themes and learning objectives to help you prepare for your assessments. So, this is a major part of the AP exam. Periods 1, 2, and 9 are not as emphasized by the College Board, but this one will absolutely be showing up in multiple aspects. So, you will see it in the multiple choice, very likely a short answer question, as it could be covered in the first, second, or third. It might be on the DBQ, as has been the case in recent years. And it could be the third LEQ question number 3, which is actually the second choice. But it is very likely that this period is going to show up multiple times throughout your exam. So here are the lesson topics. The first two, 4.1 and 4.14, are very skill based, whereas the rest of them are looking at particular topics, which is what we're going to go into next. So, first, we're going to focus on the lessons related to Key Concept 4.1, which states the United States began to develop a modern democracy and celebrated a new national culture while Americans sought to define the nation's democratic ideals and change their society and institutions to match them. So, we're looking at a very political based key concept here. So, contextualizing period 4 fits in here. We got to know what's happening in the period right before the time that is going to influence the way we should be viewing and analyzing what's happening. So, overall, in regards to social changes, we're seeing a lot of population growth and debates over the rights of individuals. So you can think about how kind of those debates that started with the Enlightenment and the American Revolution, those are going to continue into this period. Part of that population growth is going to be increased immigration, which is going to cause some conflict within the United States. Economic changes, we're going to see massive changes to the United States economy throughout this period, a lot having to do with the rise of industry and regional specialization. We're going to see the expansion and dependence upon slavery, increase conflict, and we're going to see ideas related to American self-sufficiency. That's going to lead to a lot of nationalism and patriotism in the period. Politically, we're going to see lots of changes to political parties. So this is one of the major things you're going to want to pay attention to is what is happening from 1800 to 1848 with our political parties, and really create a solid diagram for yourself because there are a lot of changes. How does the United States deal with other countries and other nations? And then how should the United States do that? So the different political parties are going to have various attitudes about what the United States foreign policy should be. Okay, so starting off, we're going to see continued divisions between our political parties. In 1800, we've got the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. And while you'll want to be familiar with the things in this chart, one of the major differences is based on whether states should have more authority or the federal government should have more authority. And so if you can kind of remember that Federalists are wanting to focus on the supremacy of the federal government, whereas Democratic Republicans are more focused on states' rights, that should help you with the most basic understanding of these two political parties. We're going to see the Supreme Court make some really significant decisions in this time period. The one case to be most familiar with is going to be Marbury versus Madison, which implements the idea of judicial review, where the Supreme Court has the ability to determine whether legislation is constitutional or not. And these debates are illustrated early in the period with the difficulty Jefferson has over whether he should take on the Louisiana Purchase or not. So then moving into our 1820s, we have a very controversial election. I should mention that prior to this in the 1810s, we basically have what's called the era of good feelings, where there's one political party. And then there's this really controversial election where the candidate with the most electoral and the most popular votes, Andrew Jackson, doesn't actually win the election. And so then we're going to see Jackson and others who will call themselves Democrats really tried to focus on universal white male suffrage. So increasing the ability for white men to participate in government. We're going to see the number of voters triple in just a period of 4 years. We see this impact political parties as well, as you can see here. We will eventually get to the Democrats and the Whigs. Even though Jackson portrayed himself as the common man, as the representative of the common man, he's going to do some pretty controversial things that really expands the power of the executive office. And that will lead to the rise of a new political party, the Whigs, which is going to oppose Jackson. All of these things, all these political things that are changing are also going to be evident in the development of the American culture. And so while America is focusing on expanding democracy, they're also focusing on elements that make America unique. And so trying to shift away from some of those European influences and create more of a style in art and literature and philosophy that is uniquely American. And so this is going to be evident in some of the movements that happen as well. We're going to see the rise of lots of reform movements, which will a lot of times be focused on expanding democracy and protecting the rights of people. But before those reform movements develop, the Second Great Awakening happens. And in the Second Great Awakening, it's a religious movement. It's a religious revival. It's going to be focused on increasing church membership and not only having people become better members of the church, but also to become better human beings. And so that's where kind of the Second Great Awakening leads to the reform movements, where we see people being influenced by, in a large part due to their new religious ideas, and trying to make society better, especially through temperance, which is ending the drinking of alcohol, abolition, trying to end slavery and women's rights, trying to help women become more equal participants in society. Those are the three main movements you're going to want to be familiar with. You'll want to know what was the goal, were they effective, who were the participants. All of that will really help you if you get some questions on this topic, the age of reform. So with the idea of expanding rights for individuals, we want to look at African Americans in the early republic. And one of the things that we want to understand is, how did African Americans resist enslavement? And the College Board really states that the traditional rebellions were largely unsuccessful, which is mostly true. Things like ones like Nat Turner's Rebellion and the Vesey Conspiracy did end up leading to stricter laws that restricted the rights of African Americans. But there were some successful ones, like the Amistad Rebellion and the Creole case, that demonstrate aspects of where resistance actually led to freedom. Additionally, African Americans protected their dignity and their humanity by creating strong communities and maintaining culture. And so things like combining elements of Christianity and Islam, or using folk tales to kind of covertly resist the ideas of enslavement, maintaining African names, and having extended families even when families were separated through enslavement. All of these things are characteristic of the African American communities that were developing and expanding in this period. So what do you have to know from Key Concept 4.1? What are the political changes occurring that created a more modern democracy? What distinct characteristics developed to create a uniquely American culture? And how did Americans strive to reform society to match their democratic ideals? So those are kind of the main questions you should be able to answer from those lessons. In Key Concept 4.2, we're looking at how innovations in technology, agriculture, and commerce powerfully accelerated the American economy, precipitating profound changes in U.S. society and national and regional identities. So what you're going to notice in this time period is there is a rise of an American identity and regional identity. And a lot of states are going to feel more strongly towards their region than to the nation. And often those attitudes are going to be based on issues of economic policy and slavery. So the American system is going to really make these differences pronounced. As we see the North becoming more industrial and the South becoming more agricultural, we're going to see the differences in the labor system used become more prominent, and all of that is going to become part of their regional identities. Additionally, the Missouri Compromise is a great example of the major division that was occurring in the nation over slavery. That happened in 1820, and it really was kind of a preview of the Civil War that would come just 4 decades later. What we're going to focus on in this unit is the massive changes caused by the market revolution. We're going to see that the North is going to become heavily industrialized, focused on manufacturing, dependent on the cotton that is produced in the South, fed by workers that are producing, or by farmers that are producing crops in the West. And so we're going to see really our regions become distinct and then dependent on one another. And what allows that to happen is the transportation revolution. We're going to see the massive increase in canals, in railroads and roads, and that is going to allow for cheaper and more efficient transportation of goods, and it will allow for this regional specialization. The market revolution is also going to impact society and culture. We're going to see migration patterns change. We're going to see more people moving to urban areas to take advantage of the industrial work, but also we're going to see a lot of Western migration to take advantage of farming opportunities that are out there. This will fuel, as I mentioned, internal migration, but also international migration. We're going to see changing attitudes towards women. In a lot of these factories, young women are going to be working in the factories, and so some of their gender and family roles will have to shift a bit. So from Key Concept 4.2, you want to make sure to know what led to the profound changes in the U.S. economy and how the market revolution impacted specific groups of people and regional identities. Our final key concept, 4.3. The U.S. interest in increasing foreign trade and expanding its national borders shaped the nation's foreign policy and spurred government and private initiatives. So thinking about America on the world stage, there's going to be both diplomatic and military actions as they seek to control lands in North America. So through diplomatic efforts like purchasing land or dealing with land boundaries, they're going to be able to do this through negotiations. However, the military will be heavily involved in things like the War of 1812 and the removal of Indians from territories that the U.S. wanted to control. These things, over the period 1800 to 1848, will grow the U.S. in their sense of power over North America and their influence over the world. And so that's going to really fuel nationalism and patriotism. The Society of the South and the early Republic. What we see happening here is that even though the majority of Southerners were not owners of enslaved persons, they're still going to support the system of slavery because of the economic value to the South, and then also because of the ideas of white supremacy. And so what we're going to see is that as the U.S. is more involved in world commerce, the importance of cotton becomes higher. By 1860, almost 60% of all of U.S. exports will be cotton. And so it's going to have a huge economic importance, especially for the South, but it's really for the whole country. And that is going to increase debates over the expansion of slavery because there's this economic piece that's tied into it. So for 4.3, you want to be able to explain how the U.S. increased their participation in international trade, how the U.S. dealt with foreign policy concerns, both militarily and diplomatically, and how the growth of the nation impacted debates over slavery. The final lesson for APUSH Period 4 is a skill lesson based on causation. And really what this lesson is asking you to do is to be able to describe how foreign policy, economic systems, and political parties influence the development of an American identity. And so what you want to think about, what makes America America at this time? What are those aspects of identity? And how did those changes influence that? Here's your list of very important terms. So I take a screenshot of this or copy them down somewhere. These are the terms that you absolutely have to know for the College Board. These are the ones that are most likely to show up on your AP exam. Key themes. These are a great thing to look at when you are trying to predict essay questions. So, a lot of times the essays the College Board chooses will be based on one particular theme. And so, thinking through how work exchange and technology changed in this time would be a great way to think through what a potential prompt could be. So, these are the themes that are addressed in this period. And then finally, here is one of my best study tips. These are the learning objectives. This is what the College Board tells you. This is what you need to know. And so I would absolutely write out answers to these questions. If you can explain the causes and effects of policy debates, you are going to be you will be in possession of a great set of notes for you for understanding one of the major ideas of this unit. So use these learning objectives to create a study guide for yourself, and it will be hitting the most important concepts the College Board wants you to know. So thanks for hanging in there with me and watching this video. I hope it was helpful for you. And if so, please like and subscribe.